So welcome. Again, my name is Jerry Angelini, and I work for a mushroom company. Some of you are familiar with it. It's called Host Defense. I'm the education director. I've been with them for about 7 years now. I like to start off with a little bit of information about myself, just to kind of give you a little bit of background. I have a Master's of Science in Rehabilitation Medicine from Boston University. I've studied traditional Chinese medicine at a couple of different traditional Chinese medicine universities and colleges. I've studied Ayurveda, Western herbalism from a number of different people. I've been doing this for 30 years, so like you just kind of keep adding people to your. I did like a course with so-and-so. I can't remember. It's been so long, right? I've had a private practice for over 30 years. It is integrative healthcare. I still have it, as a matter of fact. It's pretty small at this point in time because I spend most of my time training for host defense, but this is where technology actually can be really helpful. I can pull them up on Skype, I can get a look-see at how they're doing, talk to them, see what their eyes are like, see what their tongue is like, and we can go from there. It's old school work, right? With technology. Other than that, tonight, they actually asked me to switch up my typical presentation, and which is great. Like, we always love mixing things up and changing, bringing a little bit different information in. And we're going to talk some about like the planetary role that mushrooms function in. And some of you might be really familiar with this. Having worked with Paul Stamets for the past 7 years, he goes out and talks about this stuff all the time. And we usually let him do that. That's usually like, okay, Paul, knock yourself out. Most people come and listen to me talk for the way that mushrooms impact your health and wellness. But they wanted me to add a little of Paul's work in there to start off with. So we've been, over the past 10 years, we've been working really hard at Host Defense and Fungi Perfecti to change the paradigm in the general population on what mushrooms really are. Because when most people think about mushrooms, this is what they're thinking about, that fruit body, you know? They're thinking about something that they might put on pizza. Maybe they're thinking that it's the angel of death mushroom cap that will kill them, or a psilocybe, which is going to make them hear colors and see sounds, right? Or maybe they're thinking they have candida or, some other pathogenic fungi, right? Well, that 10 years ago, really, like when I talked about mushrooms, that's what, oh, you mean like psilocybins or like, magic mushrooms? I'm like, no, like mushrooms, like the ones that have been used in traditional cultures for literally thousands of years. But the Western continent, we kind of fell away from that. There's that mycophobia that we've been working to dispel for a good 10 years now. And now when I come and I do trainings, people are like, we love mushrooms! And it's awesome to like see the change that's happened in 10 years. We've been working in 3 major areas. The first is ecological restoration. So mushrooms are not just about those fruit bodies. Mushrooms are mostly about the mycelia. And the mycelia, which is the root structure of the mushroom, is really doing all the work. We use mycelia to impact agricultural bounty. We use mycelia to increase reforestation, to impact water filtration. We're using mycelia to impact pest management. So really there are a number of different ways that we can use fungal mycelia to impact our ecological impact on the planet itself. We humans are nasty beings. We are dirty, dirty, dirty creatures. We have polluted this planet. There are plastics in the Mariana Trench. There are microplastics in every waterway. There are pesticides that are showing up in Antarctic ice. Like, they're not spraying pesticides in Antarctica. It's drift. Right? So we've really polluted the planet, and we need to come up with a manner, a couple of different approaches to start cleaning up after ourselves. And in fact, mushrooms can help us do that, specifically the mycelia. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that. The second way we've been working with mycelia is actually to impact our sister species on the planet. Say that 10 times fast, right?
Yeah.
We're looking to, in fact, help, again, undo some of the damage that we humans have created. So, most notably, we've been working with bees, and I'll show you more about that, in their fight against something called colony collapse disorder, and the widespread sharing of viral pathogens amongst bees and some of the parasitic mites that they struggle with in their hives. The third way we've been working really hard about training people around the whole mushroom experience has really been about human health. So supporting the host defense mechanism within each of us, but also how mushrooms can impact many of the other systems of our body. So that's going to be closer to the end of the training this evening. So we're going to cover a lot of material. But first, let's just do a little hello. Here are some mushrooms. This is what they do. This is how they function. You've got 3 basic types of mushrooms. You can put them all in a category with. Is your decomposers, right? They take detritus, whether it's, you know, plant material or dead animals or insects, and mushroom mycelium break them down. They secrete enzymes. They digest them. They create topsoil. They sequester carbon in that topsoil. They're really quite important. You've got mycorrhiza. These are symbiotic fungal species. Approximately 90+% of every plant on the planet comes with an endophytic mycorrhiza, which means there's a fungal living inside that plant. Who knew, right? Kind of cool. And then there are your pathogens, and these are things like Phytophthora, maybe powdery mildew, maybe corn smut, things like that. So you've got these 3 basics. You've got these decomposers, the mycorrhiza, and your pathogens. When we talk about decomposers, these are critical for creating ecosystems. Without fungal species, we would not have topsoil, right? So we wouldn't be here, basically, right? Because topsoil is what our plants grow in. We eat the plants. It's what animals eat. Then we eat the animals if we eat the animals, right? And that's actually what makes it all work. If it weren't for fungi, we would not have that basic aspect of our ecosystem. And you can see here the mycelia. They actually bind soil together, and it aggregates the soil so it can, in fact, reduce erosion and maintain a strong ecosystem. It can reduce susceptibility to pathogens in the soil because those mycelia are secreting immune complexes and enzymes that can, in fact, reduce pathogen proliferation in that ecosystem. They increase your resistance to drought because the mycelia are sponge-like in their structure, and they hold a tremendous amount of water. So as they start to decompose things as well, they secrete a lot of liquid and fluid as well. So they increase water in that ecosystem, so it can bring a lot of support to places that are struggling with water management. You can increase macro and micronutrients. Remember, those fungi are decomposing carbon structures, whether they're plant or animal or insect, and they're basically digesting it and redistributing all of those nutrients into their ecosystem. They help balance soil microdensity. Again, it's this concept of these are living beings that are attempting to fight off predators and pathogens in their environment. So, like, this is all happening and none of y'all see it. It is completely under the earth, right? But without these mycelia, we wouldn't be here. So we need to actually start to wake up and think about what we don't see, right? And take that into consideration as we're thinking about our lives. So white rot fungi they break down lignin. Lignin is one of the components in plants. So most people talk about cellulose, but lignin is another compound, especially in trees, that give them that really hard structure. And the white rot fungus is actually what breaks those down and turns them back into soil again, right? One of the interesting things is you can also use these white rot fungus to break down other compounds, so tannins, tannic acid. And so we know that comes from leaves and some other detritus, right? When the fungi break that down and they decompose it, it means it will not leach into the waterways, which means it won't go into your streams, your rivers, and your ponds and lakes, right? Why do you not want tannic acid in your ponds and your lakes? What was that? Acidification. It's acidification, and it reduces marine or aquatic life abundance, really. It's really hard on marine life. So for all of y'all who fish or, who like to see birds on the, like whatever, right? It all gets impacted, right? And you can actually see here when they used a really basic filtration system. They had alder chips where they inoculated one of the white rot fungi, and then they had the alder chips without the fungi inoculation. And when they saturated them and let them filter through, what you get is either a lot of tannic acid or very little tannic acid. And that's purely because of the mycorrhiza and the fungi that are living within those wood chips. Now, this is also really helpful because they can also break down benzene rings. And where do we find benzene ring structures? Yeah, so most of the synthetic compounds, all of your hydrocarbons, right, those are benzene rings, right? So this is really helpful because we do know that fungi can break down oil and gasoline, in fact. And convert them into a food source for themselves and basically clear up the environment around them. So again, more really great reasons to have more fungi in their soil. Fungi also, like on a more microscopic level, these are what are called electron scanning micrographs. This is just a magnified picture. These rods are E. coli. The mushroom will, in fact, they will just absorb those E. coli and then eat them. It's food for them. Kind of great, right? Great way to clean up E. coli. This is actually oxalic acid. It is secreted from the mushroom mycelium. Oxalic acid is important because it's an acid, first of all, that will break up minerals like rocks, and then it is able to then distribute those minerals throughout their ecosystem. So one of the things that we've learned about mushrooms in general is that in a forest situation, the understructure of the mycelia and the mycorrhizae are actually a little bit like nutrient shepherds. What they will do is they will take either carbohydrates from the trees that they get through the roots, and they will shuttle that carbohydrate across the forest and distribute it evenly to plants that may not be getting as much sunlight as others. But they will also take things like micronutrients, minerals, and shuttle those across throughout a forest so that those are also shared pretty much evenly throughout the forest. So you get great nutrient accessibility with the presence of these mushrooms there. Right. This is it's just a microscopic view of the mycelia, and here you see them secreting these, we kind of call these generally extracellular metabolites because we really don't know what else to call them. It's really, it's quite a number of different compounds, including enzymes like cellulase and hemicellulase, which break down cellulose, right? And then there's some lipases in there, some proteases in there. There's also some really great immune complexes, most of which are not classified at this point. And much of this is where the science associated with mushrooms and fungi, this is where it all lies. This is the great unknown that we're trying to move into in more and more ways. Fungi will also balance out like things like nematodes. So this is some research on Stropharia rugosa annulata, which is called the garden giant. Pretty tasty mushroom. It's like a giant mushroom. Like they grow big, and they're really meaty. It's almost like the texture of a steak. In fact, their mycelia create something called acanthocytes, and an acanthocyte is kind of like thorns along their mycelia. Why this is important? Because if there are nematodes in the soil, the nematodes will brush up against those acanthocytes and it will puncture their skin and it'll kill them. So the Stropharia rugosa annulata reduces some of the pathogenic, like the pathological nematodes that can do significant damage to some of the larger tree species. So again, like, who knew, right? Like, who knew? Kind of cool, right? We can also use mushrooms in actual water filtration. So you remember that picture of the E. coli being eaten by, like, inside that mycelia? You can put that to work on a much larger scale. And we've done this in a number of places. This was done in the New York State Park Service. One of their rivers and ponds was having some unusually high E. coli rates. This is probably due to farms that were close by that had cows and animals. And so, you know, their waste is typically high in E. coli. And after rains, they would get concentrated movement of E. coli into these public water spaces. So they worked with Fungi Perfecti to create a filtration system, and it's basically kind of like a waterfall of vats of Stropharia rugosa annulata growing through these wood chips, and the water would move through these vats in kind of like a waterfall type fashion. And the outcome of this is really interesting. So your E. coli rates before you hit the filtration system is pretty hard, and then downstream afterwards you get a significant reduction in E. coli rates. And so this is, again, this is going to be something that happens after a significant rainfall, where you're getting all of that movement through most of that farmland that's moving all of that E. coli downstream. And so capturing it or having these fungi resident in the soil is actually a way to reduce some of this burden on our waterways. Interesting, right? And this is we went to print with it. So they did a research study on it. You can find this online at pubmed.org.gov if you're interested in finding out more information on it. So we're not done yet. And this is kind of one of the things, like, I'm hoping like you're starting to see like why we kind of geek out whenever we start talking about mushrooms. There is so much going on in the fungal world that we don't have a clue about, right? Let's talk a little bit about agricultural. Agriculturally, we can impact harvest rates by adding in mycorrhiza. The thing when you talk about conventional farming, what do they spray? All the time. They spray pesticides. What else do they spray? Fungicides. Yeah, what else? Fungicides. Yeah. Guess what the fungicides do? They kill your mycorrhizae. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of productive, because when you start looking at how mycorrhizae function, These were all the same seed lot, same planting, same watering, same fertilizing, no mycorrhizae added, mycorrhizae added. No mycorrhizae added, mycorrhizae added. No mycorrhizae added, mycorrhizae added. But it's not just about what we can do for harvest. There are actually some plants that are mycorrhizae dependent. So, like I said earlier, about 90% of all plants have a symbiotic fungal species that lives either in them or on their root structure. There are some plants that require mycorrhizae to grow. This is the lady slipper. It's an endangered species in this country. It's one of the 2 temperate orchids in this country. So I'm from the East Coast, and when I was growing up, which was a while ago, there were spots where you could find these, and they're some of the most delicate and beautiful flowers that you can find in kind of like a swampy, foresty area, which we have a lot of in Massachusetts, by the way, which is why they grow there so well. They are dependent upon mycorrhizae. So if you try to transplant one of these, you'll kill it. Unless you take a large enough area around the plant in as undisturbed a fashion as possible. Because you have to transplant all the mycorrhizae along with the plant. And then you have to, it's like you can't transplant it unless you have this very extensive approach to it. So there are a number of different, the ghost pipe, right? And you've heard of that out here, right? It's another mycorrhizally bound species, and it's resident. If you try and transplant it, you'll kill it. It won't take. So there are a number of these different plant species that, if we reduce their ecosystem, but if we're also putting out a lot of these like toxic compounds, it's going to have a negative, significantly negative impact downstream, especially over the next 10 to 15 years. Because it builds up speed. Like it's like a bike going downhill, and we're going downhill. So we really need to figure out ways that we can change our approach to ecosystem management. Who do we have here?
Cordyceps.
Yeah, that's our Cordyceps mushroom, right? Cordyceps is an entomopathogenic fungi, which means it eats insects. Cordyceps, the spores will alight upon an insect. It starts to eat it alive, and it sends its mycelia into that insect, and it eats it, and while the insect is still alive, right? And then at some point, close to the end of that insect's life, because the mycelia is consuming more and more of it, the Cordyceps mushroom makes the ant climb up a tree to the underside of a leaf, shoots the mycelia into the leaf to anchor it, and then it kills it and pops a mushroom out of its head so it can sporulate onto the floor of the forest. Right? This is your zombie apocalypse mushroom. All right? You don't need science fiction. Like, the real world is a lot scarier and crazier than anything like that. All right? So, there's a reason why I'm talking about this, because we can actually use mushrooms for pest management too. So what you can do is, and you got to be careful with this, because certain insect species, they actually smell the spores and they clean and kill whatever's bringing those in them. But if you work your mycelia of that particular entomopathogenic fungi, and it's kind of, you serially identify strains that do not spore, you can create, and it's kind of like hybridizing, or, you know, finding the best way to grow a set of peas. Like, you know, it's just finding the right mushroom species in what we call an anamorph, which is the asexual reproductive phase of Cordyceps. You can actually train it to attack these pests, and it'll literally clear out like a whole nest without damaging anything else. It's really kind of cool, right? So there's no like toxic chemicals that you're spraying where you have to like, oh, the dog can't go out for 24 hours, or well, how about the human? Should we go through that for 24 hours?
How long does it take for that to be effective? Like how long? Like a week?
Probably, yeah. It depends on how fast you get that particular anamorph to grow, and how big the nest is, and what the temperature is, and the relative humidity. So there are a lot of factors involved, right? Because all of those things impact growth rates with mycelium. So
it's not unreasonable. It's not like years.
No, it's like, yeah, usually within a week to 2 weeks. Yeah, sometimes a month. So again, it depends on the size of the plant. Yeah. So, we have been doing some work with Washington State University, trying to figure out how we can get a handle on this colony collapse disorder thing. This is an example of part of that work. And this part of the work is something that is going to take a little while, because whenever you try and develop a biological intervention, you got to jump through some EPA hoops, and they're not big, wide hoops that you can just leap through. They're these little small hoops that you got to be like, okay, how the hell are we going to fit all of that through that hoop, right? So this is one of those situations. But what we've done is we found an anamorph from one of the Cordyceps species, and it's called Metarhizium anisopliae. And we've figured out how to grow it so that when bees are attracted to it, because it's super sweet and the bees love the sweetness of it, they'll get it on their bodies, and then it actually attacks the mites that are parasites on the bees. And it eats the mites and then pops a little mushroom. Well, it doesn't pop a mushroom out of it because it doesn't spore, but it kills them and they die. It's totally cool, right? Now, we're having a little bit of a difficult time with this because the relative humidity and temperature inside of a hive is a lot different than the Cordyceps mycelia grow at. So we're having some difficulties kind of like convincing it that it really likes warmer and wetter. Some of us just don't like warmer and wetter. Some of us like cooler and drier, right? And so we're trying to convince it, and it's basically, you just try and find, you keep exposing different specimens to that temperature, and you try and find the one that grows the best, and then you grow that, and then you strengthen that, and it can take a couple of years to do this. But what we're finding is that because bees are so hygienic, they're always cleaning themselves, that mycelium doesn't impact them at all. But those mites, the Varroa destructor mites, they're nasty little buggers. They don't clean themselves too well, and they get eaten pretty easily. So it's kind of cool. We have some hoops to jump through still, so that's not. We haven't figured that part out yet. The part that we have figured out is that, in fact, mushroom mycelial exudates. So the things, do you remember those little droplets that I showed you from the mushroom mycelium that had immune complexes and enzymes? Those are really great for bees. They're really cool for bees. They have, in fact, increased lifespan of bees. I'm going to show you some. What happened 30 years ago? Paul saw some bees sipping all the liquids from a mushroom patch of Stropharia rugosa annulata that we love this mushroom. It's a really cool mushroom. It grows in pretty much any ecosystem. Doesn't do too well in Florida, but you can make it work there if you work really hard. Alaska's a little bit chilly, but you can kind of get it to work for maybe a couple of months. So you gotta, temperature does have an impact, but it works pretty well in most of the States and in Canada, right? But what we found, like he had asked some questions of some people, and no one knew what was going on here 30 years ago. About 6 years ago, he was at a TEDMed conference, and he heard about bees and colony collapse disorder, and he was like, mushrooms, bees, mushrooms, immune system, mushroom bees, mushroom immune system. How about we give some bees some mushrooms and see if it helps their immune system? And he spoke with Steve Shepard, who is the department chair at Washington State University, the Department of Entomology, and we've been working together ever since, and it's been really amazing. We have seen significant impacts in bee longevity. This doesn't look like a lot. This is critical. The first 7 days of a bee's life, they're taking care of the brood. And if you don't have bees that are alive, your brood dies, right? And then you don't have any bees to go out and forage, to feed, to collect nectar, to collect pollen, right? This is critical right here. So when we take a look at those first 7 days, the number of bees that stay alive, that's what keeps your hive alive for years to come. Right? This is some of the research results from our very first study with Washington State University, and this was on the change of viral load. So this is a direct antiviral activity in bees. I do have to like put that caveat in there. You know, in bees, because that makes it okay, because it's in bees, right? So a rice control extract, no fungi. It actually increased viral load by 63% after a week, right? So one exposure increased viral loads by about 63%. Reishi, the red reishi mushroom, one of my favorite mushrooms. It's a really phenomenal mushroom. At a 0.1% dilution. What does that sound like to people? What kind of dilution does that sound like if you were thinking about different dosages? That's a homeopathic dose. That's what's a 1x dose. Kind of interesting, right? It dropped 87% in terms of the viral load in the bees. And then from down there you got 1%. 72%, 68, 56% reduction in viral loads. These are powerful. We don't see these anywhere, right? And it gets better because we've done a couple of different studies with Washington State University as we've had more and more research that has said, yeah, this is really something. They get more research grants. We give them more money. We give them more product. We support them. And the United States kind of comes into the whole picture too, the government. And what we've come up with is the different types of viruses. And there's about 32 types of viruses that are pretty nasty with bees. But these are your three big ones, right? So deformed wing virus. Amadou and reishi reduce viral titers by 1,000 to 1. The black queen cell virus, 500 to 1, chaga and reishi. And then Lake Sinai virus reishi reduces Lake Sinai virus 45,000 to 1. This is a mind-boggling response. And so we're tickled pink by the results, obviously. It's just amazing, and we were able to go into print in Nature scientific reports around this. So again, this is mycelia. This is the root structure. These are those substances that they're secreting as they're just going about their day, living their life, trying to make their environment a little bit better, right? And it makes our whole world a little bit better. And it definitely helps those bees live their life a little bit better. Right? The key with this, they're orally active, which means we don't have to run around with a really, really small syringe and like, okay, bee, I'm going to try and get that thing. Right? No. They sip the sugar water with a 1% dilution, right? Which is nothing, right? And you get these amazing reduction in bee viruses. It goes through a digestive process, it works through the microbiome, it activates through the liver detoxification pathways, it's active in their blood. Oral ingestion. You can't beat that, right? The ease of dispensing it, super, super simple. But what can we do, right? While we're trying to jump through the hoops of getting this passed through the EPA and the American Veteran Association and the FDA and the FTC, what can we do? It's really simple. Plant mushrooms. I'm serious, it's really that simple. We sell Stropharia rugosa annulata, what's called Inoculation Spawn. You just buy it in a kilo bag. It looks like that. And then if you have like a plot of land where you have like a perennial bed with mulch, you just sprinkle it on, and we give you directions and everything. You sprinkle it on, you throw mulch over it, you keep it wet like you would keep any perennial. And that's going to inoculate that soil. The mycelia will grow into the ground, and plant some wildflowers along with it, because then your bees will come, they'll eat the wildflower nectar, right? And they'll drop down and grab some of that mycelial exudate from your Stropharia rugosa annulata. I mean, talk about, like, how does it get easier, right? Question.
Do you think it's likely that the decline in bees is because of antifungal behavior with agriculture?
There's about 5 major factors associated with bee decline. One is the pesticides, one is fungicides, one is glyphosate, one is monocropping, and the other is Varroa destructor mite. Those are your 5 majors. Yeah, so it's really complex, thank you. And I just got told that I am so far behind. Wow, okay. So if you don't have a big plot of land, get a planter. You see, put a wildflower instead of a fern, right? Put down your inoculant, cover it over with wood chips, keep it wet. If it dries out, guess what's going to happen? It'll die, just like a plant. Keep it wet. Not like soaking wet, but just keep it moist, right? There you go. You can do this in a planter off of your window, right? Little bits is okay. You don't have to change the world, just change your little life around you, right? Add this one little thing. And then you got these beautiful wildflowers that are looking at you out your window, and you're good to go. Maybe you have a balcony. Take a little step. You really don't have to do a huge amount. But if everyone did a teeny bit, all together, it's tremendous what we can accomplish. Now, I thought you were going to say something.
I was going to say, we can't bring your guys' over. We've checked, just bring it across the border.
Oh, wow. That really...
But,
we can't?
no, we can't, because,
you can't even set,
the border
have
won't
it
allow
shipped
us to
over.
bring it over.
Can't you label it something else?
No, we can't.
I know people that do.
I'm sure. Yeah, so for all of you out there, we are not going to relabel anything appropriately.
No, because it's a soil organism, so they won't let you bring it across. And you're being
Really?
confiscated and fine you if you try.
Okay, so that's a problem. There might be someone here in Canada where you can access Stropharia rugosa annulata. That's SRA. That's the one, and the only reason we talk about this is because it's like the one that has all of those activities that we've been studying for so long. So it's a really great mushroom. I'm sure there are others that would help. Practice, go out there, try new things. It's not going to hurt. If you put other edible mushrooms out there, or other what are called polypore mushrooms, they're not going to hurt the environment. They will help it. So knock yourself out. Okay, I have 15 minutes to cover 45 minutes worth of data. So I'm sorry I got I got totally carried away here. This is your immune system. This is your immune system on mushrooms. No, just kidding. Basically, we've done a lot of research over the past couple of years. I know, right? What we found is host defense mushrooms impact your immune system very powerfully. And they increase a very specific set of immune cells. Macrophages, natural killer cells, natural killer T cells, B cells, and T cells. They do not engage these three types of cells. This is important. These are what are called granulocytes. Granulocytes, typically, when they're activated, they release histamine into your body. What does histamine do? Yeah, inflammation, like the itchy eyes, the sneezy, right? Allergic reactivity, right? This is good, right? We don't want to have people have an inflammatory response, right? But these cells do, in fact, have inflammatory cytokines associated with them. And a cytokine is a messenger molecule, right? So what we know is that host defense not only increases the innate immune cell number and activity, we have found that host defense mushrooms also engage our immune system's checks and balances. And this is really important. The last thing we want to do to people is say, you know, take this product, it's going to stimulate your immune system, and you take it and then it stimulates your immune system and it doesn't back off, right? The immune system, we want a Goldilocks zone here for your immune system, right? Not too hot, not too cold, it's got to be just right. And this is exactly how the host defense products work. So we're not too worried about, you know, is it mycelium, is it fruit body, you know, has it gone through a 1.5 year long process of sitting under the moon and the stars and the sun. We just tested it, all right? And we had an immune lab test it, independent. They ran it. We're going to publish it because the response was so profound and unlike any other substance we see in the natural product industry that this is going to print. And it's going to print in the British Journal of Complementary Medicine. Hopefully we'll see it out there in the next 3 months. It's just gone through its final edits. So yeah, it's really very exciting for us. And it really, like, if you want something that works, that's going to increase your immune cell potential, but make sure it doesn't overreact, that's what the product does. Wow, I don't know how I'm going to cover all of this. I just got a little panic there.
Stay a little longer.
Maybe a couple minutes long. We'll go over a couple minutes, all right. I don't want to, like, you know, I really respect your time. I don't want to take advantage of that. So I honor that. So, and I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for coming. Chaga. This is not a mushroom fruit body. This is what's called a sclerotia. Think of a sclerotia like a tuber. It stores energy, all right? So from our perspective, and from my perspective, we should not be harvesting chaga. For the most part, when people harvest chaga, they cut it off or they knock it off, they leave a hole that then becomes a vulnerability point for pests and pathogens. In the old days, 100 years ago, a chaga harvester would bring a bucket that had beeswax and a candle so that the beeswax would stay liquid. After they harvested, they would paste the beeswax over that open hole to protect the tree. You don't see that anywhere anymore, right? Because humans don't really care about it. They think, that's mine, I can take it, it doesn't matter if it kills it, right? Now if we had wild harvesters that had their beeswax in their little pot with a little candle to keep it nice and warm and fluid, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But we're seeing a global decline in chaga, globally. So there are some areas that still have a strong presence, but when we take a look at the global decline due to over-harvesting, I actually think it's like harvesting tusks from elephants. Honestly, that's my analogy. We can sustainably cultivate chaga easily, and the research is showing us that sustainably harvested chaga is in fact more powerful as a support than the wild harvested. And this is for a couple of different reasons. One is consistency. Right? You don't know what you're going to get from tree to tree. Right? But if you sustainably cultivate, you maintain standards and consistency. The other is that when this is growing out in the wild, there's some pathogens that are growing on it too. And it triggers something that's called an endotoxemia response in your blood. You don't get that in sustainably cultivated chaga because it's clean, right? There's no pathogens associated with it, so you don't get endotoxemia. We've done some significant testing on chaga over the past 6 months. Every wild harvested chaga had an endotoxemic response associated with it. Every single one of them. The Host Defense product had none. And that's great because it's not contaminated. But we also found that the Host Defense chaga was very powerful at interrupting something that's called tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF-alpha. TNF-alpha works like the starting gun in a race. When it's triggered on your cell membrane, it sends like a domino effect set of reactions into the nucleus of your cell that creates a whole set of inflammatory responses. So to get an inflammatory response, you trigger TNF-alpha at the cell membrane, and then you get the inflammatory response. The Host Defense chaga drops it by about 65 to 70%, which is really amazing. It's not 100%. You do not want to turn off your inflammatory response, right? Because if you hurt yourself, or if you get a cold, or if you have a tumor, you want some inflammation, you know, like you want it to work, right? But for a lot of us, we have way too much TNF-alpha signaling. We have too much inflammation. And so what we know is that chaga will help balance and kind of bring that cell and that inflammatory response back into a balanced situation, right? There's your Goldilocks zone again, right? Not too much, not too little, just right. Chaga specifically impacts a kind of cell in our body. The cell type is present in your lungs, in your skin, and in your digestive tract. And it's really the surface barrier cell type of all of these organs, these 3 organs. Does anyone might know what that cell type might be? What do we got?
Epithelial?
You got it. You said that? You're going to get one of these. You're really smart. Yeah. It's epithelial cells. Chaga balances the immune response in all epithelial cells in your body. The key is that some respond much more rapidly than others. So in your respiratory system, the response can be like 2 to 6 hours. Your digestive tract, it can be 24 to 72 hours. Your skin, it can take 6 to 12 weeks. Right? So, and that just has to do with, like, remember, half of the skin is dead, right? So it takes a long time for those epithelial cells to replace themselves and to pull themselves back into balance. But this is really important because when we have an imbalanced immune response in these tissues, it's pretty generalized into the whole system. Like in the skin, you get the red, itchy, irritated, maybe it weeps. In your lungs, your bronchial tubes, they constrict and they get tight and you lose oxygenation. In your GI tract, you get inflammation. Things like inflammatory bowel issues, right? So this is all situations where we want those epithelial cells to kind of be brought back into the normal range, right? And what we have found is that in research, chaga impacts all of these tissues because they're all the same cells. And they have all the same immune response. And chaga balances that response and brings it into homeostasis. Does that make sense? So if you're a barrier, and I call these barrier tissues, right? Because keeps your insides and outside separate, right? Your skin, that's easy, right? That's the outside, that's the inside. Your lungs are the outside on the inside too, though, right? But so is your digestive tract, right? That's the outside all the way through to the inside, right? And that barrier tissue, if you have an issue with barrier tissues, chaga is your mushroom.
So good for celiac?
So, of course, we don't diagnose, treat, prevent, cure any illness or disease, but if you want to help, like, balance that immune response, that's exactly what I would do. Yeah. How'd you like that for a response? Okay, good. Here's our cordyceps again. Cordyceps. So, I'm a Minions fan. Right? Okay. We're going to start over here with the lungs, though. Right? Lungs. Cordyceps impact lung functioning not just by opening up those bronchial tubes. It actually increases oxygenation. So if you have a person that's not oxygenating their blood, the diffusion is less than adequate, cordyceps increases oxygenation. It also supports athletic performance, not just by increased lung functioning and oxygenation, but also by increasing ATP formation in muscle tissue.
Question, like, is it like any reason for low oxygenation? Or
That's what we've seen so far.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would, I'm not saying would it increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, but if the oxygen present in the air is like 50% at sea level, would it help?
I'm going to get to that in just a second. So in terms of athletic performance, not only does it increase ATP formation, it decreases lactic acid production, which is what makes those muscles ache, right? Historically, it was used in Nepal and Tibet, high altitude. So if you're going to go skiing at Whistler for your weekend, this is, cordyceps time, right? Because it's going to energize you, it's going to increase your oxygenation, it's going to help you adjust to altitude. But the other great thing about it is that it impacts testosterone levels in men and women. Now, it's gender appropriate in terms of its increase of testosterone. But maybe if you're going to Whistler for a nice ski weekend, you might want to do more than just skiing there. And this is where you would get some benefit from the libido and sexual functioning aspect that's associated with cordyceps, right? So when you think about cordyceps, you're thinking about vitality. So, and in Chinese medicine, lungs, breathing in. In Ayurveda, prana comes in through the lungs. You breathe it in. It builds vitality. But then you also get the energizing aspect of the muscle function, the athletic performance, and then the libido and sexual functioning aspects as well. Right? Yeah. Lion's mane, yeah. This is your smart mushroom. Your brain and nervous system are the most metabolically active cells in your body. They use the lion's share of all of your nutrients, right? So we got to make sure that we're feeding our neurological tissue, and it's food, right? Lion's mane is an edible food. Lion's mane has been shown in research to support cognitive functioning, especially in situations of dementia. So again, some things take a little bit more time than others, right? So with cognitive functioning, lion's mane can take about 2 weeks to kind of ramp up. While you're taking it, you're good to go. If you stop, you got about a month before your brain turns to mush again. So it's food. It's food. It's nutrient. You need to continue to take it if this is a concern for you, right? We've also seen it impact mood. Again, about 2 weeks to ramp up, right? And then you're good to go, and then when you stop, you got about a month. All right? The research was on anxiety and depression. So it's non-specific mood balancing.
Is there any reason not to just take it all the time?
No, I've been taking it every day for 7 years.
Okay.
I hope it helps. I still remember some things here and there. So. But you never can be too sure, right? Reishi, this is our last mushroom. Thank you guys for being patient with me and bearing with me. I'm actually doing pretty good with my time, right? Yeah, okay. Reishi is the imperial tonic. This is pretty amazing. This mushroom is, and I said it before, remember, this is the one that the Lake Sinai virus, 45,000 to 1, right? We're going to start over here with the cardiovascular system. There's a significant amount of research on how reishi impacts everything from cholesterol, triglycerides, LDLs, and HDLs. It even supports ATP formation of your heart muscles, especially when they're in a low oxygen environment. So if you have some cardiovascular plaque and reduced blood flow, and you want to make sure your heart is as strong and functioning as well as possible, this is your reishi. Now if someone comes to you and they say, well, you know, I have some pressure on my chest and I have some pain down my arm and they're pale and sweating, what are you going to do? You're going to call 911. Yeah, call 911. Don't give them reishi. You give them reishi when they have the risk factors, right? Risk factors, not when they're like dying on you. Right? Okay. Just making sure we're all clear on that, right? Okay. Reishi also supports kidney functioning, and it does that by reducing oxidative damage in the tubules, so it increases the kidney filtration rate. Really great. Kidneys are really difficult to support, and if we can find something to support them, these are really critical organs for us, right? All right. We also get supports liver function. Reishi protects liver cells against toxic substances, and it helps your liver detoxify. So if you're going up to Whistler again, maybe for that weekend, maybe you're going to want a little reishi, right? Because it's also going to support endurance, right? So reishi is, how do I get from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.? Cordyceps is, yeah, I'm energized now, right? But yeah, reishi gets you through to the end of the race. So maybe some cordyceps, maybe some reishi too on that Whistler weekend, right? It's been shown to increase wound healing in your intestinal tract. This is really important. So, does anyone here take NSAIDs occasionally? You know, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories? Yes, from time to time, right? But there are some people that take them every day. And if you take NSAIDs for 7 days, 85% of the people in one particular study showed significant intestinal lesions from the NSAIDs. Yeah. There are a lot of people that take NSAIDs every day, right? But intestinal lesions can be caused by a number of other different factors. And so if that's a concern, reishi can actually help those cells heal more rapidly with less what's called morphological change, which means that the DNA of those epithelial cells in the intestinal tract stays stable. Okay. It actually decreases DNA damage from gamma radiation. How many people here think they're exposed to gamma radiation? Yeah, because we got a sun, right, good. Yeah, we're all on the same page. Okay, and then I think one of the coolest things is that it changes your central nervous system. It switches you from a sympathetic nervous system to a parasympathetic nervous system outflow. Basically what reishi does is it takes you out of that fight or flight mechanism so you don't feel like a bear is coming at you and you should be either shooting it or running from it. It actually puts you in that rest and digest, I can be a little bit more zen today experience. Right? So this is why we call it a tonic. This is like all your major organs right here. Yeah.
What about people that don't lead very healthy lifestyles to begin with? Like, is there any substances that kind of counteract the effects of reishi?
That's a really interesting worded question.
Yeah.
The way I would actually ask it is, does reishi undo some of the damage that we cause by our food choices, our lifestyle choices?
Exactly.
That's actually how I would look at it. And yes, because it's supporting cardiovascular health, it's supporting kidney and liver and intestinal health. Yeah, for sure.
For someone that might already have like a cardiovascular disease, if they're on medications, like are you worried about interactions?
Great, medications. So reishi at higher amounts can thin the blood a little bit. So if you're on a blood thinner, I wouldn't do over 1 gram. But 1 gram a day, like if you take it for a year, that consistent support, if you're changing your diet, if you're changing your lifestyle, which is things that I suggest for everyone, right? As best as we can, we got to do a little damage control, right? And then we introduce some of these substances, we can really have a profound effect over a longer period of time.
So there isn't like something that is contraindicated taking
Blood thinners.
just the blood thinners.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
So, chaga, cordyceps, reishi, you're taking them all every day. Do they interact with each other in any sort of negative way, or?
Not negative, no. Yeah, I'm going to show you a couple of formulas that have all of them in it. Yeah, they play well together. They're good in the
But
same
if you
box.
wanted to up the intake of one, for example, based on what it's for, like the cordyceps.
Yeah.
You could do a mixture, but you could
Then add a little bit more.
amp up the
For
cordyceps?
sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, we give it a little boost.
I'm just curious your opinion on nootropic coffees with things like Ganoderma mushroom
Yeah.
and cordyceps and all that sort of stuff. If you find that is like a helpful come together, or
Yeah.
is it killed by the hot water getting added to it?
Right. So there's a lot of discussion about damage control. That's kind of how I like to consider it. We do a lot of things in our world today that put a lot of stress and strain on our body in a number of different ways. And you know what, people will cite me research about how caffeine is good for your brain, and my response is maybe a little bit, but if you're doing like 5 ventis and like a coffee macchiato, whatever the hell it's called, that's not good for you. Like, it's just not good for you, right? So if you decide to have green tea, which has what, approximately 35 milligrams of caffeine, and you have a cup of that, that's a lot different than having over 2,000 milligrams of caffeine in your daily diet. So, and there are people that do that. Like, so those monster drinks, oh my God, right? Like, people actually go to the hospital with heart palpitations. Well, of course they do. That's what caffeine does, right? So what we need to do is figure out how can we support energy naturally? How can we maybe bring people off of that like edge that they're maybe running after with the like, oh yeah, you're totally great, yeah. You know, and have them find energy sources that are a little bit softer yet really profoundly experienced. So if you add reishi into your coffee, great. Just don't have 20 cups of it. Like, stick to a cup, right? And then have some reishi on the side if you want. Or there are other great herbs that support energy too, and we can talk about those in a second. I do want to just finish this up with a couple of products that I want you to see because I think they're kind of cool. I'm going to skip over that. So we talked about reishi, right? What is reishi for? It's right there. See, it says the heart. Right, there you go. Chaga is for your barrier tissues, right? Epithelial cells, right? Cordyceps is vitality and energy and lungs and libido. Brain, right? That's a no-brainer, right? Lion's mane. Har, har, har. Brain. I want you to take a look at this. This is one of my favorite formulas. It's super simple. It's half cordyceps, it's half reishi. This is my athlete's formula because it's half cordyceps and it's half reishi. The cordyceps is energizing. It provides support with endogenous testosterone formation, which means we make it in our own liver. It's not an injection, right? But then you've got the reishi that helps with tissue repair, cardiovascular health, and it gives you the long-term energy. This is what I'm going to send someone to Whistler with. And they can take 2 capsules at breakfast and 2 capsules at lunch while they're there so they can adjust to the altitude. They can have some great energy, and then they can, you know, do a little damage control while they're up there too, right?
Can you take this every day?
You sure can, yeah. Yeah, if you're one of those people that, so there's a couple of different reasons you would take this every day. So I have some athletes in my private practice, they take this every day. But I also have some elders on it every day because Reishi and cordyceps together in Chinese medicine support what's called kidney yin and yang. And as we get older, we tend to burn through the kidney yin and yang, and we lose some of that constitutional energy. And this formula rebuilds it. So it's perfect for anyone over 45.
So I see you have capsules and tinctures.
Yeah.
Is it?
Why?
Yeah, what's,
You know, do you take capsules or do you like liquid tinctures?
I've tried both.
Which works better for
Capsules
you?
are my preference.
Yeah, go with a capsule. Because, you know, if I give you a liquid, it might sit on that shelf and it won't get in you.
Okay, so as far as,
Just take it. Yeah,
Application.
take whatever you're going to take.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I would have given you really great clinical reasons why you do each. And now I'm like, what are you going to take? Like, I just want it to get in you. That's what's
The cordyceps in Massachusetts, would it be the same as the cordyceps over here?
So the species can change. There is some, the range of these mushrooms can be quite vast, anywhere in the temperate forests. But you will get different species that tend to focus on particular insect species. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of different cordyceps species and subspecies. So it's kind of like any mushroom. You'll have a general range, and then you'll have places where it's stronger, and then you'll have overlaps in that range. So you really have to look and know your mushrooms and know how to identify them. Yeah. So we also have a formula called Breathe. Again, we're making it super easy for you. Breathe, right? So, and this is for breathing, right? It's 3 mushrooms: Cordyceps, reishi, chaga. Right? Cordyceps opens up those bronchial tubes. Chaga helps balance the immune response in epithelial cells in your lungs. Reishi balances the immune response systemically. The liquid, and this is the one place I'm going to kind of go outside, I'm going to draw outside of that line. The liquid, you feel it in 2 to 3 minutes. And so if you're feeling a little tightness and you're feeling a little gaspy and you want to open those bronchioles up, you're going to take 1 or 2 mLs. You don't have it here? Oh, that's right. Damn it. I'm sorry, I forget what's good in which country. I apologize. Just to be fair, I actually train in 6 countries. So, do the cap, open it up. It's much more rapid than if you have to digest through the capsule. So it takes you about 40 minutes to digest through the capsule. If you open it up in your mouth, it'll hit you quicker. Okay? And it's a little bit on the sweet side too, so it's not unpleasant. The immune spray. This is one of those products I bring with me everywhere. So I fly a lot, right? And before I walk into an airport, I give myself 3 sprays of my favorite Myco-shield. Before I walk onto a plane, I give myself another 3 sprays before I walk onto one of those flying petri dishes. And then, if it's a long flight, I'll do another 3 sprays somewhere in between. Right? The reason is because your oral mucosa, this is your primary portal of entry for pathogens. When someone sneezes, are we familiar with the aerodynamics of a sneeze? 3 to 5 feet. And then it convects for an hour before it precipitates.
Oh my God.
Right? So, yeah, think about all of those public spaces, or home, when you're home, like people, "Achoo!" Right? Sneeze in your sleeve. Don't sneeze in your hand, because then you go, "Hey, how are you?" Right? So sneeze in your this is what we do with you know, kindergartners. Sneeze in your sleeve, achoo, right? That's how you do it. But we want to make sure that our oral mucosa is protected. We tonify the immune response in the oral mucosa. Research that came out last month in January in a sample of plaques from Alzheimer's patients, 85% contained the gingivitis pathogen. In research on cardiovascular plaque, 100% contain the gingivitis pathogen. We're going to shift our oral mucosa. with using these mushrooms, because mushrooms, in fact, feed your probiotic microflora. So we want to feed those probiotic microflora in our mouth. We're going to use the cinnamon or peppermint. Choose your flavor. They're both great, right? Do 3 to 4 sprays 3 to 4 times a day, right? Especially now, kids, 2 sprays before they go off to school, 2 sprays when they come back in. And if you're really good, you can get them while they're running by you. Just aim low so you don't get their eyes. It's a little burning. Yes?
What's the base for the sprays? Is it like an alcohol base?
It is alcohol, yeah.
And is that a corn alcohol base?
It is corn, it is organic corn alcohol, and it's non-GMO too. Yeah. You don't really you really taste the peppermint or the cinnamon. That's why we put the essential oils in there. Okay. Stammet 7. This is your 7 mushroom mix. Remember the one that has all the multi, that's the one right here. It's got Cordyceps reishi, lion's mane chaga, maitake, and then 2 others, Messima and Royal Sun blazei. This is your daily whole body support and immune support. We know that Stammet 7 from preliminary research increases immune functioning about 33% stronger than a single mushroom at the same amount. So you're going to get a stronger immune response from the Stammet 7. You can take 1 or 2 capsules at breakfast, 1 or 2 at lunch. Most of the time you're not going to take mushrooms at night because they will build energy in your system, and then you'll wake up at 4 a.m. and you're like, why am I awake right now? And it's because, oh, I took my mushrooms at 9 o'clock last night. That's right. Yeah.
Reishi being an exception?
No. So some people will use reishi effectively at night when their cortisol is dysregulated. And then once that cortisol becomes regulated again, it will wake them up at 4 in the morning. So what will happen is you get like 2 weeks of really great sleep, and then you're like, why am I doing this again? It's because what happens is the reishi resets your cortisol clock, and then it starts to rebuild the constitutional energy in your system, and you got to take it at breakfast and lunch. Yeah.
So now, is this the one you can only get capsules in Canada, or can you get a liquid here?
Do we have this in liquid? We have this in liquid. You can do this in liquid. See? Thank you. Mycom. This is your big guns. It's 17 mushrooms, has a really profound synergistic effect. This is what I use with people when they're in the fight. So what does that mean? They feel like hell. They're sick. They're fighting a cold. They're fighting a flu. We want to get their immune system engaged. We want that immune response balanced. We're going to use 2 capsules every 2 hours for 4 times. So what is that? 8 capsules total? No. 8 capsules total. I can do math, right? It's amazing. You do that for 2 or 4 days. Most people are fine by day 3. Right? It's a lot of mushroom, short period of time. But it's safe, even at large amounts. If you have a tumor, if you have like those cancer thingies that you're trying to fight off, right? This is where my community is going to engage your immune system. This is not a cure, right? We're not curing anything. We're engaging our body's capacity to get in the fight. And you do it by your staging. If it's stage 1 or 2, you use 2 capsules at breakfast and 2 at lunch. That's 2 grams. If you're stage 3, do 3 capsules at breakfast, 3 capsules at lunch. That's 3 grams. Stage 4, you do 4 and 4. That's 4 grams. And again, you're going to get more in you because you want it to fight harder, right? What most people respond with is that they had less side effects. They had more energy. Some people report having maybe a couple extra months more than they thought they would have, right? Sometimes people have really amazing responses to this and whatever else they're using. We don't know what's doing what. We really don't, right? We have seen some literature that shows that mushrooms can increase the efficacy of specific chemotherapy treatments and reduce tumor resistance to chemotherapy, most of those are in vitro. They're not in human clinical trials, right? But the research is very promising. So our approach is work with an integrative oncologist, get on some mushrooms, make sure you do your liver testing just to make sure you're not having any problems with liver enzymes, and see what happens. Okay? See what happens. Most people respond, well, everyone that we talk to responds positively to
Where are they doing the research on that?
it. All over the world.
Where?
Yeah. Okay. Can I hit 2 more products? Is that all right? I'm really going over, I apologize. I want you to see the brain formula. If you haven't used this, if you have issues with clear thinking, brain energy, fog, this is that formula. It is lion's mane reishi and a little cordyceps with bacopa, gotu-kola, and ginkgo. This is going to be really amazing to bring energy into your brain. There is ginkgo in here, so if you are on a blood thinner, you're going to avoid it and just default to lion's mane. The stress decompress, this is for the brain that never shuts off. All right, so this is for the squirrel, right, that's going around and around and around and around. The reishi and the lion's mane pull you out of that fight or flight mechanism. Lemon balm and skullcap quiet the mind and quiet the body. And then ashwagandha gently energizes the system. This is a non-sedating formula, but it pulls you out of that, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to get it all done today. Right? And it gives you the energy to feel like you can do it too. Right? One at breakfast, one at lunch, right? And if you're really struggling, maybe one at 4 or 5 p.m. Right? But notice how not too late. Right? All right. How was that for a marathon road race?
Really?
Was that good? Did you like it?